Hello everybody, this is founder Leiazel with Fantasy Grounds Academy. Today I'm going to do some character builds. We're going to talk a little bit about romance and handling that within a role-playing game. In particular, we're going to be using Fantasy Grounds Unity to build characters, and there's some content out there that's available for those that are curious or would be interested in potentially hosting some sort of romance within the games between characters. My personal experience has been that I try to stay away from that as much as possible. And part of that reason is that, I think it's natural to have this sort of thing in a game, but quite often it turns into something more personal. And that's something I usually try to avoid. And I don't really want the game to go south because people aren't getting along or someone's uncomfortable or however you want it to be. So in the Baldur's Gate 3 game, there is some role-play interactions that allow you to make relationships. I don't think it's meant to be sexualized or in any form of negative connotations for role-playing, but I think that in some role-playing games, you'll get two people that are enamored with each other through the game, and then it turns into something bigger and worse. So, or something not positive for the table, or maybe it's uncomfortable for some of the people that are at the table. So that's something that you got to walk on lightly. Just depends on your group too, and what you allow. Some of the things that I've noticed is that there are some product out there that is on the DM's Guild. And it's a product that was put out about a year or two ago. It's a module that you can get on the DM's Guild, and it's a domestic handbook. Let me get that up, and I will show you. So what this does is it handles a lot of different things. It's called the Adventurer's Domestic Handbook, and what they've done is they've given you some ideas and examples. So one of them is how to deal with romantic relationships, family relationships. Becoming an apprentice, owning a business, buying land. Some character options were added to this for like different classes and such. And then there's some indexes and there's some NPCs that kind of help with inspiration. You got employees. So there's different things that are out there, products that might help you with this sort of topic. It can be a little bit touchy and detrimental to a campaign if it gets out of hand. So I'm going to read this, and hopefully this doesn't incite any anger or anything, but basically this is from that content. So if you introduce romance into your game without prior conversations about the expectations and boundaries, it can easily evolve into jokes and crude references. And I agree with that. That happens all the time. 7 times out of 10, you're going to get that. It may be annoying to some tables and totally normal at others. This is why it's important that you have a conversation to your players and such about your intentions beforehand. So if there's any sort of question about that, it's already been discussed. Some groups have love romance and they wish to explore the slow and meaningful development of such. Others might lack the maturity that's needed by everyone, so that the role-playing of a romantic type relationship can be expressed in a kind of a positive story-building manner as opposed to just being sexualized or acting silly about it. But some like the humor of it and, ways to cope with feeling awkward or uncomfortable during these types of things. So it really just depends. If you expect a level of maturity around relationships at your table, then, make that known that you need to have that assurance or at least that conversation. So if someone gets out of hand or doesn't like it, they can certainly not join the game. If you're okay with occasional jokes and you make sure that you set those boundaries with your players ahead of time, and you can also put up the safety toolkit. So if somebody's gone too far, one of the players can announce that they're not happy, and they can just click on the safety toolkit extension and it will show the GM, a green, yellow, or red card, and the DM will know to kind of tone it down or to intervene. So there's ways that you can handle it at the table. But just remember to try to keep the content, PG-13 if possible, and to make sure that everyone understands that you're expecting some sort of maturity about the situation. There is times where sexuality and different things are implied in role-playing games, and that's totally natural. It's not taboo, but it's certainly not appreciated or needed or necessary by everybody. So it just depends on how things go. But you don't want that sort of thing to detract from the game or the adventure, and you don't want it to certainly make everyone else uncomfortable. I've been involved with a couple of games where they've had people that are interested in each other in the game, and then eventually they wanted to meet up in real life, and I can't stop that. There's nothing that can stop the power of love, but at the same time, it can really discourage other players, especially if they're not there for that and they just want to play games and they don't want the complications of relationships. So it really just depends on how things can go. But this content, it has role-playing, romance and seduction. It has that built into the module for some suggestions. Not everything has to be sexualized. You can definitely set up some kind of crush or romantic thing or some kind of innocent love that's not always about sex or about any sort of craziness that would bring grief or anger to the table from your players. So just kind of keep it kind of low key. I think you'll be okay. I don't think it should cause too many problems as long as that discussion was done before the game starts. So hopefully, when you're actually playing, you'll be able to introduce elements like this when it actually lends to the story. It even covers marriage. There's some things about your relationships with families, like supporting your family when you're adventuring, bringing them with you occasionally, and then, of course, having children. So those are things that might come up in the lifetime of your character throughout a campaign. So they have some suggestions, and they talk about these topics in the domestic handbook. And then, of course, there's some charts and tables that will basically talk about different things, like putting your kids in school. Maybe you're going to put them in an academy to train them in magic or with combat skills. Maybe someone in your family is going to keep a business going in one of the towns that you're in. Maybe you got to come up with some rules or some kind of guidelines for that. Maybe there's some kind of weird story or backstory with marriage and such. So really depends on what you want to do with your campaign. So basically, you could bring your family with you, have children. There's even a conception table, like the percentile. There's all kinds of different ways that this content could lend itself to your actual campaign. So again, I'm going to go to the modules area. I'm loading up the different books that I have loaded, and if I scroll down to the bottom here, the actual content is called The Adventurer's Domestic Handbook. It's put out by Grimm Press, and it is on the DM's Guild. I will put a link for that after the chat, but if it's something that you want to incorporate in your games, this might help you with some other things. So it's not all just about romance. There's familial things, business things. So that's just one of the topics. The reason I'm bringing this up is obviously it's Valentine's Day, but in the Baldur's Gate 3 series, you have these opportunities of romance, sort of like Dragon Age, but a little differently. I did a little research on it, and it looks like that Baldur's Gate does have some romantic elements to it, but it's not really what you would expect, like you would from Dragon Age, but it's a little different. It really doesn't matter if you bring your companions with you or anything like that. They have their own thoughts and feelings about what you do and what you say. So that really means you won't be able to pick and choose companions in order to get them to like you and such. It has to do with your actions. I kind of hope that would be kind of similar in role-playing games, because this is more of a video game mechanic. But if you have a game going, it might be interesting to have something where you have a little bit of that in place in case that occurs. And it's not something that you need to focus on necessarily. So that's basically part of the premise of the show. Is I was going to build some characters, and I thought I would mention the romance thing because it is something that's present in role-playing games. It doesn't get talked about a whole lot. And I thought it'd be interesting to look into a little bit of that. And I found the DM's Guild has a couple things out there that would give reference to those sorts of things and how to handle them in a game. So yesterday I started to think about creating content that's based around Baldur's Gate 3, ran this by some of the community and some of the social media and such, and I'm hoping that as the game is released, I'm going to start trying to build a little bit of content that is kind of centered around that storyline. And I've already created a character. I've created Will. He's a warlock. So I went ahead and went online and kind of looked up his stats, and then I made his actions tab, and so he's ready to go. He's pretty much done. I just don't have a token or a portrait for him yet, which I'll do that sometime soon. So the next character I was thinking about building was the fighter, and that is Leiazel, which is the Githyanki fighter. I have a link that I've looked up earlier that basically helps you with building these type of characters. So in Fantasy Grounds, I have a URL here. If I hit Control Copy and then I paste that into the text chat area, you'll get a link. And from that link, you can actually drag that over and drop it onto any sort of record that you want. So I can take and drag and drop this. And this link will take me to the web page where the stats are so that I can look up whatever I need to do to build the character. So I'm going to click on the link. You won't be able to see it because of the way I have OBS set up is basically just a way that you can check this stuff and not have to keep showing both screens going back and forth. So I'm just going to click on the link here. It's going to take me to the web page. Gives me a warning that says the URL requested to be opened. Do you want to allow it? You would say yes. So that's a security check just in case there's a link that you don't want to open on accident. So we would basically go through the source. I'm on the Baldur's Gate 3 wiki. This is under the Fextra or at the fextralife.com section. I'm going through the characters that are on there, and they have the main characters listed, and then they have some suggestions on builds and that sort of thing. But it's mostly to do with the actual video game. What I was going to do is go through and check out the actual characters. So I have Githyanki race here, which is the one of the main characters, which is Leiazel or Leiazel. So she's sub race. She doesn't have one, but basically that's who I'm going to build today is one of the main characters. So Leiazel is one of the first characters that you come across in the game, and I thought it'd be kind of appropriate to build that. So just start at first level. I looked at the game mechanics. It's a little different than 5e. Most of the stuff's pretty compatible. There are not one-for-one in a lot of these things, so I kind of have to guess or add my own thing to it. It just depends on what you're doing and what type of content you're trying to build. But basically, you can take this information and build off of it. So if I wanted to build Shadowheart, which is this half-elf cleric, I could do that. So Shadowheart is basically another female character that's a cleric that is basically worships Shar. It's one of the dark disciples of Shar. So Shar is not essentially a good aligned god, but it's not necessarily evil. Matter of fact, Shadowheart has some good qualities to her. The subclass domain is a trickery domain. So she worships Shar, which is kind of like a Forgotten Realms deity that's not known for its good deeds always. But it's pretty interesting roles and classes. So I could basically pick one of the two. I think the Githyanki would be the easiest one. She has some of the traits and qualities that I don't think a lot of people play the Gith race in Fantasy Grounds or even in the tabletop role playing. So I'm going to try to build her up and see how that turns out. But Leiazel is one of the main characters. Might be saying her name incorrectly, but basically she's a Githyanki warrior, kind of a no-nonsense, kind of a tough character, pretty much focused and controlled and that sort of thing. So that's basically what I'm looking at is trying to recreate the original characters within Fantasy Grounds. There's 5 of them. You have Astron, he's a rogue. You have Shadowheart, it's a trickster domain cleric. You have Gale, who's a human wizard, or I guess you could call him a wizard of such. Will is a warlock, and Leiazel, of course, is the fighter. And that's who I'm going to focus on today is Leiazel. So on this page that I'm on the internet under the Baldur's Gate wiki, Leiazel has already has some things. So they say that her strength is 17, Dex 13, 14 Con, 11 Wisdom, or 11 Intelligence, 12 Wisdom, and 8 Charisma. So she's not very charismatic, but nonetheless, what I'm going to do is leave the ability scores blank, and I'm going to just build the character based on the notes that are on the website. So it gives you her equipment, her starting skills. So she has athletics, acrobatics, arcana, survival, intimidation. So I have to figure out what her background is, and you can kind of do that with the base of the actual lore. She's actually Githyanki warrior. She tends to be kind of more a little overbearing, her attitude. It gives you some of the things that the characters would do or what they might do. She doesn't have a subclass, so we'd have to come up with some sort of archetype for her. But that's because she's first level at first, so there's no archetype till 3rd level. So we'd have to probably choose that as we go later on as you level up. But she gets great weapon fighting, so that might be something that it might be one of the, lending itself towards one of the other subclasses. So let's get this going. So she has Githyanki half plate, leather boots, long sword, short bow, and she has the following skills: so athletics, arcana. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll start looking for a background that kind of fits her. So she might be an Outlander since she has survival and that sort of thing. So that might be a thing. And I don't know what else to get, but we'll have to take a look. So I will take and open up the backgrounds and let's see what we have. So I'm in the character area on the right-hand side here. I'm going to go to backgrounds. And there's a list here of backgrounds that I can pick from. So I want to pick one that's close to what she is in the game. It doesn't really say outright because, again, she's just first level. So she doesn't have her archetype yet. But I'm going to go ahead and build her character sheet. So I'm going to go into Characters. And I'm going to click on the green plus button, which is to add the character sheet. I'm not using the character wizard. I'm actually using the old drag and drop method. I'm going to leave all the ability scores blank and then just adjust them after I'm done. So I might give her the Far Traveler or something along those lines. I have to look at the description to see what they get. So let's see. Far Traveler. So in this case, the Far Traveler, they get to have, let's see what they get. Far Travelers, they get to have insight and perception. So I don't think that's her particular build. Let's try Outlander. So Outlanders get athletics and survival. So I think that's as close as we're going to get to her actual build. So there's survival and athletics. So that makes sense. So she's going to get those initially. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the Outlander background and drop it into this area where it says background. That's the first step. So a battle ready character. The abilities are first. We're going to skip those because at the end we'll adjust those. And then you want background and race and then class. So I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop. And this assumes that you already have at least the player's handbook or some form of character creation content. So I want to take and grab the background that I want, which was I believe it was the Outlander. And take this little shortcut or this pin, left click, drag, and hold, and then drop it into this background area. It'll automatically populate these things on your character sheet. So you have Wanderer, you get one type of instrument, and you get one language of your choice. And then under your skills, if there's anything in here, athletics and survival were added. So I don't want to pick those as I move on with character creation. So I'm going to go ahead and close backgrounds. I'm going to open up races. Now this would require you to have, I think, Mordenkainen's Mordenkainen's guide to everything, or not Tasha's, but I don't think it's I don't remember which book it's in, but it's in one of the others. It's not in the player's handbook. So I want to grab the, in this case, this is a Gith or Githyanki. Let's see what we have here. So, yep. So here's the Gith. So it's from Mordenkainen's. So I will grab this race here, the Gith itself, and drag it over. So grab Gith. We're going to do the Githyanki, not the Githzerai. Hit this. Now, once you do that, it automatically will add in the bonuses. So she got a +2 to strength, +1 on wisdom. So that's basically what you're getting from that, plus whatever. You get a little bit of psionics and some other things. So that's what I got from the character race. And then if you go here, you get Decadent Mastery, Githyanki, Psionics, Martial, Prodigy. You get the Wanderer feature from the background. You get Common, Gith, and there's the other choice. So I might pick one of the more astral or mundane, maybe even one of the other more exotic things, like maybe Sylvan or something, or Dragon or something that's really kind of old, maybe Giant. So then I want to take a look at class. So we're going to bring over the fighter. So if I can open up this little magnifying glass here. Now you can drag the class from the area over here on the right. So from classes, I can open that up. Here are the list of classes. And you'll notice that if you have multiple books open, it's going to list fighter like 50 times if you have a lot of different books. I usually just grab from the player's handbook just to be consistent in case I have problems. So I always grab from the player's handbook even though I have 50 other books open. And that way, if there's any issues, I could tell right away because I always grab from the same book. So this way, if there's any carryover, crossover issues. So I'm going to drag the player's handbook version over, drop it. And once I do that, it's going to plug in whatever data is associated with this particular character. Now, I want to be careful and make sure that I choose the right ability scores or the right skills for this. So I already have athletics and survival. So I get 2 more skills to pick and choose from. So she has 5. So athletics, acrobatics. So acrobatics and arcana are definitely something I might pick, or intimidation, and athletics. And I think the arcana comes from her background. So I'll have to manually pick that. I have to look at that. So she already has athletics there, so I don't need to take that. I need to take acrobatics. So you got to be careful, don't double up on these. So intimidation and acrobatics comes from her fighter experience. The other 2, survival and athletics, comes from her background. Okay, so those are picked and chosen now. I want to go into her skills and her abilities and find out why she's getting that arcana. So Decadent Mastery. You can choose, you're proficient with 1 skill or tool of your choice. So I think the skill is what she chose, and think arcana is what she's going to pick. So that's something that gives you some bits of knowledge, comes kind of like from her background. And then if you go to her other abilities, she has Githyanki Psionics. You get Mage Hand, Cantrip, and the hand is invisible when you cast the cantrip with this trait. When you reach 3rd level, you can cast Jump. So that's kind of cool. So you get some spells to start off with. So Mage Hand, and you get the invisible when you cast a cantrip with this trait. Well, the Mage Hand is invisible. So that's kind of cool. So if you were just building your character you're new, that's something that you get from being a Githyanki. So it doesn't look like you have full-fledged psionics, but you get jump, and then at 5th level you get Misty Step, and you can cast the Mage Hand any number of times because it's basically a cantrip the way it works. And here over here is the actual class, so it's at 1st level. She's able to later on get the basically her fighting style. I'm going to pick for her is the Great Weapon. So Great Weapon fighting. So we'll put a notation on her sheet for that. So fighting style, in parentheses, I'm just going to type Great Weapon style. That way I remember what I chose. You don't have to do that. It's just kind of a way to keep track of it. Extreme effort, what is that? When you make this ability check and dislike the result, you can spend a hit die to improve your check result. Oh, that's pretty cool. So that's a pretty cool mechanic. I'll have to remember that. And then if you want to choose your languages, I think I was going to pick one of the more, I think I'm going to do Draconic. She can speak the language of dragons. I don't remember in the game if she has anything beyond Common or Gith, so I'll just pick Draconic. She can have simple weapons or martial weapons. She gets 1 instrument, and she can use all armor and all shields. So I'll have to look at that when I actually build the equipment part of this. So that's cool. So I got that kind of straightened out. Now what I want to do is take a look at some of the other things that she has in her online on her character sheet. So she has half plate, leather boots, long sword, and short bow. So I'm going to make sure I have those. But Githyanki medium, it's a medium armor. It's equipped. It provides AC. Sometimes some special type of. The armor was forged to Vlach standards under the exacting eye of the Githyanki smith. So I don't see anything special on it. There's really no particular thing other than that it provides protection, but you have to keep in mind it also hinders spell casting. So if you're going to be a spellcaster, you got to be careful. So it looks like there's not much difference on it other than how it looks. And then you get a 15 AC for a max of 2 if you're Dex modifier. So that's not bad. So I'm going to give her half plate in the inventory. Swap out some equipment because she has the starting equipment that she gets for her class. So let's take a look at that. So we're done leveling up. So that's basically what you do is you do the ability scores first. You do the background, the race, and the class and level. So I'm going to edit the ability scores now because I'm done building a character and I want it to match the stats that she has in the video game. So in the video game, she has a 17, 13, 14. So 17, 13, and 14. And then the next 3 stats, 17, 13, 14. Okay. And then I think her wisdom is 12 and her charisma is 8. She doesn't have a very good personality, but nonetheless, yeah, 11, 12, 8. So that's her stats. And then for her equipment, I'm going to come down here and take a look at that. And let's see. So she's got a backpack. So she has a battle axe here. We'll get rid of that. Chainmail, clothes, crossbow bolts. So she's not going to have a crossbow. She will have a short bow. So we'll just get rid of those. Anything else? She does have a shield. There's some equipment. I'll leave that there. And a crowbar. Yeah, okay. So she has chainmail, so I'm going to get rid of that. Okay, so to match the build description for first level on the wiki, I'm going to give her certain equipment. So I'm kind of cheating and just giving her whatever she has in the game. So at first level. So here are the items that pull those up. If you have the content, you can drag and drop this stuff over. So I'm going to type half and see what we get for half plate. So yep, Here's the half plate. It may be kind of closer to mithril, being that, yeah, it looks like, let me look at the regular half plate. So that weighs 40 pounds. Mithril weighs 40 pounds. It's really not much different than one from the other. So I'm just going to give her a regular half plate. We'll just call it Githyanki plate. And then she gets, let's see what else. Leather boots, a long sword, short bow. Okay, so I'll do the boots. So just some regular old boots. And then I'm going to give her the short bow. So short bow. Yep. And then, of course, I'm going to give her arrows and a quiver. So there's 20 regular arrows and then a quiver. What else does she have? So there's quiver, longbow, leather boots, half plate. Yeah, so that's basically what she gets. She starts with great weapon fighting. I'm not sure why, because she doesn't have any great weapons on her. But maybe later on in the game she gets them. But I don't think a long sword is going to be a great weapon. So let me look at the long sword, because you can use it both two-handed or one-handed. But it's not really a... let me look at the great weapons and see what we got. So there's a great sword, which would make more sense, but I don't know why she has the long sword. Yeah, heavy, two-handed. Let me see if it has to be two-handed or not. But she does definitely have a long sword, so we'll give her that. So long sword. Drag and drop that over. I don't remember if she had a shield on that list or not. Don't think so. Oh, she has a studded shield. Oh, that's a wrong character. That's why. Okay, let me look again. So, yeah, no shield. So that makes sense. So she probably uses that blade two-handed, and I don't think she uses a shield, so that makes sense. So I'll go ahead and grab this and close it, or delete it. I do have a quiver. I have the bows, so this is going to be better in the long run. So I gave her a quiver here, and then for her backpack, I just delete the word or the letters for it was saying empty. So then I can just put the stuff, whatever I want, into her backpack by typing in the information of the container on the right-hand side in the location. So I'm using a capital letter so that it pulls over correctly. So I have a pouch here. I'm going to put the pitons or the pythons, whatever you want to call them, in that. And then the quiver has the arrows in it. And then the food that she's carrying, I'll put that in her backpack. So this is how you organize your inventory once you have it all settled. So she has a staff, which is probably part of her equipment. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. I don't need it. She has a tinderbox. I'll put that in her backpack. A bundle of torches. That'll go in her backpack. She has a hunting trophy. I'll put that in her backpack. Water skin will probably just be hanging off her backpack. And then the half plate. Let's see. Yeah, so that's basically how you mitigate that. She starts with 10 gold. It comes from her background. And let me see. So she's going to use the sword two-handed only. So I guess she can use great weapon fighting if that's the case. But if you'd think she'd have a great sword, which kind of makes more sense, but I'll just play it as it is. So, excuse me. On the character sheet, you can change the primary hand to two-handed. And then I'm going to put the ammo in, which is going to be your 20 arrows. And then these are all the fighting styles. So the only one that I'm going to get here is none of the defense or any of those. So you just delete the ones off of here if they're on there. I happen to have Rob Tui's coding effects and some automatic stuff here. So I didn't want to spend a lot of time building the character, so I kind of cheated. I have some extensions and some other things on here so that it's easier for me to build a character. So she gets second wind. Here's all the standard actions, and then here's some items that might have functionality, and they're actually on the actions tab. So what I want to do is, for great weapon fighting, if you go to your abilities and you read what it says for the great weapon style, the weapon fighting is basically you can roll a 1 or a 2 on damage for an attack you make with a melee roll that you're wielding with 2 hands. You can re-roll the die. So the new roll, if it's a 1 or 2, then you have to just keep it. The weapon must have the two-handed or versatile property. So that's why I'm able to do that. So this is a re-roll that you get. So what you can do on the properties of your weapon, in this case, is under versatile here, under the properties, you can type in re-roll, and then actually I think it's capital, re-roll 2. And what that does is it will automatically roll on your first attack roll. When you do damage, it will automatically roll a 1 or a 2. And it has to keep the second roll, but at least it does that for you, so you don't have to worry about that. And so I think that's kind of a cool thing. So re-roll 2, I believe, is the syntax. I want to make sure that, because I haven't used it in a while, I want to make sure the re-roll property is still a thing. So re-roll Fantasy Grounds. You can go to the wiki guide, the older one, and it'll have that. So the code for re-rolling 1s or 2s is you can add the re-roll. So if you look at this, you can actually see it in the re-roll 2, which is part of the properties. So if it's something that has more than 1 dice, and the dice will be re-rolled, it just doesn't show the old roll, just the new one. So there's no current way that the selection will automate any of the styles. It just needs to be set up. So that's kind of what we've done. It's built into the rule set as a kind of a hard-coded thing. So you add a comma and then re-roll 2 to whatever weapon there is. So I do have this correct. So comma, re-roll 2, and I think it's lowercase. It doesn't have to be uppercase. So there we go. So what happens is when you roll damage, it's going to re-roll that particular damage. So let's test it out. So if I actually, let me put her on the combat tracker first. That's how you test things, is you put them on the combat tracker before and check it out. So I'm going to open up the combat tracker, put that in place over here. And when I roll for damage, I want to see what happens here. So I'm going to drag her over to the combat tracker, and then I'm going to execute an attack roll, and I want to see if it actually re-rolls 1s or 2s. So let's see what happens. So I'll go ahead and make an attack roll. Just double click on the damage here. It rolled a 7, so it didn't change anything, as you can tell by what happened here. There's a 5, so I'm just going to keep rolling until, okay, there's a 2. Okay, so re-roll 2, so it actually did re-roll, and it came up with a 9, I believe. Yep. So it did do the re-roll property. It tells you in here. So the type is slashing 1d10, so it did 12 that time. So it's kind of hard to tell, but it does work. So if you double click on the attack roll and you see the die, see a 3 isn't going to change. But see, this extra is, rolling a 2 on here, I actually rolled a 9, so that was cool. So that was helpful on the re-roll, that is. So let me double click again. I'll try it again. So there's a 10, so that stays. All right, there's a 1. But actually on the reroll, it was a 9, which is incredible again. Let me do it one more time. So there is a 6, a 9. Okay, that's a 10. So I'm basically, okay, so there's a 2, so now it re-rolled it as an 8. So it is working properly. So if you have that great weapon fighting for a melee weapon or such, you just go to the properties of the weapon under properties and you type in reroll 1 or reroll 2. So reroll 2 will reroll 1s and 2s. If it only lets you reroll 1s, then of course you just put 1 there. So that's basically it. So she uses this only as two-handed, and then she gets to have the great weapon fighting. Doesn't use a shield, so it totally makes sense. So, yep. So that's cool. So that's just something you'll learn with Fantasy Grounds as you use it. Now, if you have the other trait where, I don't remember what it is, but if you basically get bonuses on damage, so you get to roll a 19 or a 20. I think it's a champion. So if that's the case, you would change that in the weapon meta. You can change this to 19 instead of 20. Or extra crit dice would be if you had like the orc extra ferocity, or I don't remember what it is, but basically you get an extra crit dice if you crit a critical hit. And then if you have 2 weapon styling, you check that here. So this is for crit on, and then you would choose either or both. And in this case, it would have been both if you had that trait. But all we did in this case for this great weapon fighting is we just added the reroll to property. And that's all you have to do to have it reroll automatically. You can still do it manually, but definitely a lot easier to do it that way. So I was talking about tokens. So I want to make a token out of the art that comes from this particular game. So I might take little screenshots or thumbnails of these characters and use those as my basically use it as my tokens or portrait. So you're going to have to build your own portraits in a different software unless you already have it. So you might have a GIF that you can use already. So let's take a look at that. So if you click on portraits as a player or a GM, you'll get these bags. And then going through the bags here, you can go through, let's see, here's some fantasy portraits. There's modern fantasy, there's all kinds of different creatures. There's also ones that are from specific games. So here's some Mordenkainen. So let's take a look at that. That might have some Gith in here because it features that race. Yeah, so here's the Gith race here. So you have a couple examples. So I might use this character instead of using this official looking one. That'll work. So just single click on it, and that populates the character so that you have yourself a little portrait. If you don't have a token, it becomes your token. So the portrait and tokens are different, and if you're a player, you cannot add your own tokens. That will be done by the GM, because the GM actually owns the tokens on their table, and the only way that you can change that is if you pick something out and your GM changes it for you, swaps it out. The players don't have the agency to switch out tokens. You can change your portrait, which will default as your token, but if you want like a top-down 3D token or something like that, your game master is going to have to set that up for you. So that's basically how this character build went. So it wasn't too bad. I mean, you got your second wind here. And when you actually change this mode down here to combat and actions, this is basically what you want to see when you're playing. So I usually set the character sheet up, and then I'll have it set right here next to the combat tracker. So it's convenient for me, and I have this main tab open. And then I'll take my initiative roll and drag and drop it down next to the dice tower in the hotkeys. And then I'll come to my abilities or my skills, and I'll look at these and say, well, I'll probably use acrobatics quite a bit. So I might want to shortcut that. So I'll just shortcut the roll, not the actual title, but the acrobatics roll. I might do the athletics one as well, depending on what I'm doing. And that's generally all I do. And then I'll take this turn complete or next actor, and I will drag and drop that also into the hotkeys. So as a player, all of my main stuff that I use quite a bit are going to be in these hotkeys. And then I would switch it to my actions tab, and on the bottom, the mode, I'd switch it to combat and action. And this is kind of what you want to see for the actual game. So when you're actually playing, this is what you want to see. So I'm going to go look at my abilities again. I'm going to go to extreme effort and bring that out, because I can actually make or spend a hit die to improve my check result on ability checks. So that basically allows you to re-roll if you don't like the result. So that's kind of a manual process. There's really no way to automate that. But I want to put that on my sheet so it reminds me when I do this. So I'm just going to drag and drop it any place on this sheet. It's going to make its own power. And all I have to do at this point is come in here and edit this. And I'll put this category as racial, I guess. Racial ability. And this is going to allow me to make my own category. And this says that you can use this, let's see, you do not regain any hit points in this way, but you can add the hit die and add the number rolled to the result of your ability check. So that's kind of cool. When you make an ability check. So this is situational. So it's only when you make an ability check, and if you dislike the result, you can spend one of your healing hit die to improve the result. So you don't regain any hit points, but whatever you rolled for the hit die recovery, you get to add that to the number rolled, see if it beats the check that you made. So that would help if you had a 1 or something like that. That would be really, really helpful. And of course, you don't have to use it either, but that is something that's kind of cool. I'm also going to bring over some of the racial things like the Mage Hand. That was something else that we got that was a racial ability. So if I go to spells and I level down here, I'm going to open up the Rob 2E coding effects. So in this case, here's spells, or you can use the player's handbook if you want. And then under source, I'm just going to leave that. And then for level, I want to put 0 because it's a cantrip. And then, or you can search for it in this case. So I get Mage Hand, and it's invisible, so that's kind of cool. So Mage Hand, I'm going to drag and drop that into my racial abilities. And that's going to be a cantrip that I can use occasionally. So let me look at the description of this particular ability. So if you go to an abilities tab and you go to psionics, what you're going to see is the description. And it says that any of the other spells except for Mage Hand is going to be used once per rest, after a long rest. And then at 5th level, you can also cast a different spell, but you have to finish a long rest. So Intelligence is your base spell casting ability. So I want to make sure that I select Intelligence in my racial abilities area. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel out the editing, come into the power group itself, and change this to Intelligence. And that way, anything that falls in there is going to be an intelligence thing for spells, that is. These other spells don't come until later. So at 3rd level, you get Jump, and then 5th, you get Misty Step. So those are some of the abilities that the Githyanki get. And let's see, what else is there? Martial Prodigy. So you're proficient with light and medium armor, and with short swords, long swords, and great swords. So being that she's a fighter, she doesn't really need to have those statements in there. But nonetheless, if she was like, say, a mage or a cleric, she would still get these abilities. So these are just there in case you're not a fighter. So she's able to use those kind of weapons. So all armor. Oh, we're going to pick an instrument. So I'm thinking I'm going to give her just a pan flute or something like that. So we're going to go to items. And I'm going to go type in pan. And there's the pan flute. So I'm going to take and drag and drop that onto her character sheet. Probably put it in her backpack or something. So here's the pan flute. And under pan flute, I'm going to just put backpack because she stores it back there, or in the pouch or whatever. And then from there, I'm also going to add it to the skills. So even though it's not going to be used very often, I want to have it handy in case she needs to use it during gameplay. This just makes it more convenient. It automatically adds your proficiency bonus, so that's why I add these on here. So anything that requires a check, I'm going to put those on here. You can manually edit and add these on. And then for the actual, you can do dexterity or charisma. I think dexterity is probably more her forte. I don't mind if my players pick the most favorable stat. In some cases, you have to switch these around. That's why you're able to move it. So in this case, most of the time it'll be dexterity. So that's basically all that I need to do to this character sheet. It looks pretty thorough. So extreme effort's on here. Let's see, what else do I have? So we have the fighting style already dealt with. Extreme effort, second wind's already on here. Wanderer makes it so that she doesn't get lost. In addition, you can find more water and food. So that's kind of cool. That's allows you to have like a better survival effort. I'm going to go ahead and put Wander. I don't need to put that anywhere. But I do want a note. So maybe I will put it under the fighter or the racial abilities just so I have it. And that way, if whoever plays this character sheet, they'll look at it. It'll be all in one spot, so you don't have to dig around. So really not any mechanical thing. It's just more or less a note. So if you wanted it to show up in the combat tracker so you don't forget, you can make this an ability or a power. So if you right-click on this and add action, all we're going to do is just add a note. So I'm going to add an effect. And it's not going to do anything mechanical, but what it's going to do is serve as a reminder that we have the Wanderer trait. Set it to self. There's no duration on it. It's kind of a persistent kind of a passive ability. And it just says you have an excellent memory, so it's hard to get lost. So we'll just say, you get advantage on like, checks and such. So I just think Wanderer is good enough. And that'll prompt someone to want to look at the particular note on that. So that's something that I would put on there just for a note. So when you're traveling around, if I go back to the combat and actions, I just put this on there. It's just going to put that effect on there, even though it doesn't do anything. It just says Wanderer. That's going to remind me that I have that trait. And then your GM can interpret what that means. But if you ever wanted to use it or bring this up, you can actually open up the description. And if your DM doesn't have the content ready to go, you can actually drag and drop the link into the chat. And then the GM can open that up and read it. And they'll say, oh, okay, yeah. So there you go. So that is basically it. So we have the torches here, hunting trap, and the crowbar. So those have actions associated with them. That's why they're on here. You're not going to find this automatically. You're either going to have to make these yourself, or you're going to have to get some of the coding effects that already have it done for you. Same thing with these actions, standard actions. Some of these are going to be included in some content, and other stuff you may not find it. So you'll probably have to either make these yourself or get some of the like Rob 2E's or Grim Press's automatic actions. So there you go. So that is basically the build for Leiazel, the Githyanki fighter in Baldur's Gate 3. She's level 1 right now. She doesn't have her archetype yet until level 3. I think in the video game for right now, you can only go up to level 4 anyways. So this is a starting level for her. If I go back to my notes, Leiazel is, so she's a Githyanki fighter. Now, if I wanted to add any notes from the video game, I could essentially add that. So I might put that she's female. And I didn't pick her background stuff, so I could pick her alignments, probably like lawful neutral. All these things can be added later. And then like any notes that come from the website where I'm pulling all this information, it says that Leiazel is a consummate warrior, ferocious even by the standards of Githyanki Krish. Faced with transforming into the very monster she was sworn to destroy, Leiazel must prove herself worthy of rejoining her people. If they do not execute her first, that is. So I'm going to put that in her notes because that's interesting role-playing notes there. So these are just things you can do. And then if you want to do her background, you can just pull up the Outlander background, scroll down, and it will list your Outlander origin. So this has different things here, but I would say exile or outcast would probably be her closest thing. So I would put, or a guide, homesteader. See, these are things that are kind of based on being on and not on the prime material plane, or these would be more, basic stuff. But I think exile or outcast would be closer. So if I go to her notes, you can actually drag the text from here, and that'll be it. So I will take that, and that'll be it for that. And then these are the personality traits. So let's see, I watch over my friends, I ran away, I love this, okay. Always picking up things, I feel comfortable. Yeah, I think it was driven by a wanderlust that led me away from home. I think that's about as close as we're going to get there. And then any of these other things, like these ideals, bonds, you kind of make that. Let's see, there's a greater good, there's honor, might, nature, glory. I think the honor thing, if I dishonor myself, I dishonor the whole clan, or the greater good. I think that's closer, the honor thing. And then for bonds, bring terrible wrath. Okay, I am the last of my tribe. I suffer awful visions from coming disaster. My duty to provide. Okay, I'm going to do the visions, terrible disaster, and then for flaws, let's see, slow to trust, violence. Don't expect me to save those who can't save themselves. Yeah, I don't know. There's no room for caution in a life of, say, remember every insult. I'm slow to trust others. Yeah, I'll do that. So those are just some suggestions. You can make up your own. Anyways, that's a complete character for the most part. Just a few little details that need to be done. But nonetheless, we talked a little bit about romance and characters at the beginning of this, and then we built one of the characters from the Baldur's Gate 3 game. So take care, everyone. Have a happy